The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the Martinez living room, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floor where 3-year-old Emma sat in perfect stillness. Her dark curls fell around her face as she arranged her collection of plastic animals in meticulous rows, lions with lions, elephants with elephants, never mixing, never breaking the pattern. Maria Martinez stood in the doorway, watching her daughter with a mixture of love and devastating grief that had become as familiar as breathing. "Emma, sweetie, do you want a snack?" Maria asked, her voice gentle and hopeful, though she already knew there would be no response. Emma didn't look up. She didn't acknowledge her mother's presence. She simply continued her ritual, moving each animal exactly 1 inch apart, her small fingers working with an almost mathematical precision that both amazed and terrified Maria. 3 years of silence. Maria sank onto the couch, clutching the manila envelope she'd picked up from Dr. Patterson's office that morning. She'd read the report at least a dozen times during the drive home, each word cutting deeper than the last. Severe nonverbal communication disorder. Possible autism spectrum disorder. Selective mutism with no clear trigger. And the sentence that haunted her most: if verbal communication doesn't begin by age 5, the prognosis for speech development decreases significantly. The front door opened, and David Martinez walked in, his tie loosened and his briefcase heavy in his hand. He worked as an accountant at a downtown Chicago firm, but lately he'd been leaving early whenever possible. Work felt meaningless when his daughter lived in a world he couldn't reach. "How was the appointment?" David asked, though Maria's red-rimmed eyes already told him everything he needed to know. "Same as always," Maria whispered, her voice cracking. "More tests, more waiting, more let's see how she progresses." She threw the envelope onto the coffee table. "She's not progressing, David. She's 3 years old and she's never said mama. Not once, not even by accident." David set down his briefcase and crossed the room to his wife, pulling her into his arms. They'd had this conversation 100 times, but the pain never dulled. If anything, it grew sharper with each passing month. "I heard her crying last night," Maria continued, her words muffled against David's chest. "She had a nightmare, I think. She was whimpering in her crib and I went to her and I held her and I kept saying, 'Tell mama what's wrong. Please, baby, just tell me what's wrong.' But she just stared at me with those big eyes and I couldn't help her because I don't know what she needs." David's jaw tightened. He'd heard his wife crying in the bathroom that night, trying to muffle the sound so Emma wouldn't hear. They were both breaking, slowly and silently, just like their daughter's voice had never begun. "Dr. Patterson mentioned a new therapy program at Northwestern," David offered, though his tone lacked conviction. "They'd tried so many therapies. Speech therapy with colorful cards and enthusiastic therapists who made animal sounds, hoping Emma would imitate them. Occupational therapy to work on sensory integration. Play therapy with specially trained child psychologists. Nothing had worked." "We can't afford another program," Maria said flatly. "We've maxed out 2 credit cards. My parents offered to help again, but I can't keep taking their money. They're retired, David. It's not fair." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. What if Emma never spoke? What if she couldn't go to regular school? What if she couldn't make friends, couldn't tell them when she was hurt or scared or happy? What kind of life would that be? Emma suddenly stood up from her spot on the floor and walked to the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. Outside, a neighbor's golden retriever was playing in the yard, chasing a tennis ball with boundless energy. Emma's eyes followed the dog's every movement, and for just a moment her face lit up with something that looked like joy. "She loves dogs," Maria observed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Remember when we took her to the zoo last month? She stood at the petting zoo for an hour just touching the goats and sheep. She was so calm, so present." David walked over to Emma and knelt beside her, following her gaze. "Maybe we should get her a dog," he suggested. "I've read that therapy animals can help kids like Emma. They're non-judgmental. They don't expect anything. Maria shook her head. We can barely manage as it is. A dog is a huge responsibility, and what if it doesn't help? What if it's just another thing we try that fails? The word fail hung in the air like poison. They were failing their daughter. No matter how hard they tried, how much they loved her, how many specialists they consulted, Emma remained locked in her silent world. That evening, after David had gone to bed exhausted, Maria sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, scrolling through support groups for parents of nonverbal children. The stories were both comforting and heartbreaking, other families struggling with the same isolation, the same grief, the same desperate hope that someday, somehow, their children would speak. A Facebook event notification popped up on her screen. Chicago PD Community Safety Day, Lincoln Park, this Saturday. The image showed police officers, fire trucks, and in the corner, a German Shepherd in a police vest. Maria clicked on the event details. There would be demonstrations, including K9 units and therapy dog interactions. Therapy dogs. Maria stared at the photo of the German Shepherd. She thought about Emma's face at the window, watching the neighbor's dog with more engagement than she'd shown in months. What did they have to lose? She clicked interested on the event and closed her laptop. Tomorrow, she'd tell David. They'd go to the park on Saturday. Maybe nothing would happen. Probably nothing would happen. But maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. As Maria turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, she didn't know that in 3 days her daughter would speak her first word. She didn't know that a police dog named Rex would change their lives forever. She only knew that hope, however fragile, was all they had left. And sometimes, hope is enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that seemed to mock the turmoil inside the Martinez household. Maria had barely slept, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios and fragile hopes in equal measure. She'd told David about the Community Safety Day over breakfast on Thursday, and he'd agreed to go, not because he believed it would help, but because he couldn't bear to extinguish the tiny spark of hope in his wife's eyes. I don't know why we're doing this, David muttered as he pulled Emma's favorite purple shirt over her head. The little girl stood compliant but distant, her eyes focused on something only she could see. She's been around dogs before, Maria. Remember Uncle Tom's Labrador at Christmas? She barely looked at it. Maria zipped up Emma's small backpack, packed with her daughter's essentials, snacks, noise-canceling headphones in case she got overwhelmed, her comfort blanket, and Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat she'd had since birth. That was different. That was chaotic, with everyone talking and the music and all the Christmas chaos. This is structured, professional. These are trained therapy dogs. They're police dogs, David corrected, his voice carrying an edge of exhaustion that had become permanent over the past year. They're trained to catch criminals and find drugs, not cure nonverbal children. The words stung, and Maria felt tears prick her eyes. She turned away, pretending to search for Emma's shoes so David wouldn't see her face. He was right, of course. She was grasping at straws, building castles in the air, setting herself up for another crushing disappointment. But what was the alternative? Give up. Accept that her daughter would never call her mama. She couldn't do that. She wouldn't. I'm sorry, David said quietly, appearing behind her and resting his hands on her shoulders. That was harsh. I can't watch you break again, Maria. Every time we try something new, you let yourself hope, and every time it doesn't work, it destroys you a little more. I'm watching you disappear, piece by piece, and I don't know how to stop it. Maria turned and buried her face in her husband's chest. I'm already broken, she whispered. I broke the day I realized she couldn't tell me she loves me. I broke when she fell at the playground and cried but couldn't tell me where it hurt. I broke when other mothers at the park ask me questions about Emma and I have to explain that she doesn't talk. I'm already in pieces, David. This hope, even if it's foolish, it's the only thing holding those pieces together. They stood in their daughter's bedroom, holding each other while Emma played with her blocks, stacking them in order of size, oblivious to her parents' pain. The drive to Lincoln Park took 25 minutes, but it felt like hours. Maria sat in the backseat next to Emma, pointing out windows at things they passed. The blue car, the big tree, the dog walking with its owner, providing a constant narration that Emma never acknowledged. It was their routine, this one-sided conversation. Maria had read that even if children didn't respond, hearing language was important for brain development. So she talked, even though Emma never talked back. The parking lot at Lincoln Park was already crowded when they arrived. Families streamed toward the open field where the event was set up, bounce houses for kids, information booths from various city departments, and in the center, a roped-off demonstration area where a police officer was setting up an obstacle course. "Look, Emma," Maria said, unbuckling her daughter's car seat. "Look at all the people and see those police cars, and there," her breath caught, "there's a dog." A German shepherd stood beside a female officer near the patrol cars, its posture alert and professional. Even from a distance, the dog was magnificent, powerful, intelligent, commanding respect. Emma glanced in the direction her mother pointed but showed no particular interest. David grabbed the backpack and locked the car. "Let's just stay for an hour," he said, checking his watch. "If she seems uncomfortable or if nothing happens, we leave. Deal?" "Deal," Maria agreed, though she had no intention of leaving early. They made their way through the crowd toward the demonstration area. A man's voice echoed through a megaphone. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Officer Jake Sullivan with the Chicago PD K-9 unit, and this is my partner, Rex. We're going to show you what our four-legged officers can do." The crowd applauded, and Maria felt Emma's hand tighten slightly in hers, the girl's way of signaling she was feeling overwhelmed. Maria immediately knelt down, making herself eye level with her daughter. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just people clapping, see? They're happy, nothing scary." Emma's face remained impassive, but she didn't pull away or show signs of a meltdown, which Maria took as a small victory. They found a spot toward the back of the crowd where Emma would feel less enclosed, and David lifted the little girl onto his shoulders so she could see. Officer Sullivan commanded Rex through an impressive series of exercises. The dog jumped over barriers, crawled under low obstacles, found hidden objects, and responded to hand signals with precision that drew gasps from the audience. Rex was poetry in motion, confident, focused, and clearly devoted to his handler. "Look how smart he is, Emma," Maria said, knowing she sounded desperate. "Look at the doggy, isn't he amazing?" Emma watched with the same detached interest she showed everything, present but not engaged, seeing but not connecting. David's shoulders slumped. This was just like every other attempt. Nothing special was happening. Nothing was going to happen. After the demonstration, Officer Sullivan announced that children could come forward to meet Rex under supervision, one at a time. "He's very gentle," Sullivan assured the crowd. "But I need everyone to approach slowly and let Rex sniff your hand first. He's a working dog, so we treat him with respect." A line formed immediately, excited children bouncing on their toes, parents holding back overeager toddlers. David started to turn away. "Come on, let's go get some lemonade. This line will take forever and Emma's not interested anyway." But Maria wasn't moving. She was staring at her daughter's face, and something was different. Emma's eyes were locked on Rex with an intensity Maria had never seen before. The little girl's mouth was slightly open, her body leaning forward on David's shoulders, every ounce of her attention focused on the German shepherd. "David," Maria breathed, "look at her face." David glanced up at his daughter and froze. Emma was reaching toward Rex, her small hands stretching out even though they were 30 feet away. It was the most purposeful gesture she'd made in months. "Should we?" David started to ask, but Emma was already squirming to get down, her movements urgent. Maria's heart began to pound. "Put her down, put her down." David lowered Emma to the ground, and the moment her feet touched the grass, she started walking. not toward her parents or away from the crowd, but directly toward Rex. She moved with determination, weaving between people in the line, her eyes never leaving the police dog. "Emma," Maria called, pushing through the crowd after her daughter. "Emma, wait." But Emma wasn't waiting. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she was going, and nothing was going to stop her from getting there. Officer Sullivan noticed the small child approaching and instinctively moved toward Rex, ready to intercept. But then something extraordinary happened, something that would change everything. Rex saw Emma coming, and the trained police dog did something he'd never done during a public demonstration. He sat down, his tail beginning to wag, his ears forward, his entire body language shifting from professional working dog to something softer, gentler. He was waiting for her. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Emma Martinez walked through the crowd of strangers without hesitation, without fear, without the anxiety that usually accompanied any disruption to her routine. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed past a teenager holding cotton candy, nearly tripping over a stroller in her desperate attempt to reach her daughter. "Ma'am, you need to wait in line," a young officer called out, stepping forward to intercept Maria. "That's my daughter," Maria gasped, pointing at Emma, who was now only 15 feet from Rex. She can't." The words tangled in her throat. "How did you explain in seconds that your nonverbal child was doing something completely out of character, something that might be dangerous or might be miraculous?" Officer Jake Sullivan held up his hand, stopping the young officer. Sullivan's eyes, sharp from years of reading both human and canine behavior, were fixed on Rex. In his 5 years as a K9 handler, he'd never seen his partner react this way. Rex was sitting at perfect attention, but every line of his body was focused on the approaching child. The dog's tail was wagging, not the excited, energetic wag he showed during play, but a slow, gentle sweep that Sullivan had only seen a handful of times. "Hold on," Sullivan said quietly to his fellow officer. "Let's see what happens." Emma stopped 3 feet from Rex, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, child and dog simply looked at each other. The crowd noise seemed to fade into white noise. Conversations died mid-sentence. Parents pulled their children back slightly, unsure of what they were witnessing. Even the June breeze seemed to pause, holding its breath. Rex's brown eyes were soft, intelligent, and completely focused on Emma. He didn't move, didn't break his sit position, but something in his gaze was different. Sullivan had seen Rex face down armed suspects without flinching, had watched him search through rubble for survivors with unwavering determination, had witnessed him track missing children through miles of forest, but he'd never seen this expression on his partner's face. It was tenderness. Emma tilted her head, studying Rex the way she studied her toy animals when arranging them, but with something more, something that looked almost like recognition. Slowly, so slowly that Maria felt like she was watching a film in slow motion, Emma raised her right hand. "Careful, sweetheart," Sullivan said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let him smell your hand first. That's how doggies say hello." Emma didn't acknowledge the officer's words. She never acknowledged anyone's words, but somehow she seemed to understand. Her small hand extended toward Rex's nose, palm down, fingers slightly curled, as if some ancient instinct was guiding her. Rex leaned forward, his nose twitching as he inhaled Emma's scent. His tail wagged faster, and a small sound emerged from his throat, not a growl, but a soft whine that Sullivan had only heard when Rex was working search and rescue and had found someone alive. "Good boy," Sullivan murmured, his own hand resting lightly on Rex's back, ready to intervene if needed. But every instinct he'd honed over years of working with dogs told him that intervention wouldn't be necessary. Emma's hand made contact with Rex's nose, her fingers brushing the soft, warm surface. Then her palm slid up to rest on Rex's head between his ears. The dog's eyes closed briefly, and he leaned into her touch with a gentleness that made Sullivan's throat tighten. Maria had finally reached them, David right behind her, both parents frozen in place, afraid that any sudden movement would shatter whatever magic was unfolding. Maria had her phone out, recording with shaking hands, though tears blurred her vision so badly she wasn't sure if she was even capturing anything. Emma's other hand came up now, both small palms cradling Rex's large head. She moved closer, her face inches from the German Shepherd's, and Rex remained perfectly still, allowing this tiny human to be in complete control of their interaction. Emma's fingers tangled in the thick fur around Rex's neck, and she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the dog's. A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Sullivan felt his own eyes begin to sting. In all his years with the K-9 unit, through all the demonstrations and school visits and community events, he'd seen hundreds of children interact with Rex. Some were nervous, some were overexcited, some were gentle, some were rough until their parents corrected them. But this was something else entirely. This was communion. "What's her name?" Sullivan asked softly, looking at the parents who stood clutching each other, tears streaming down both their faces. "Emma," Maria managed to choke out. "Her name is Emma, she's 3, she's never," her voice broke. "She doesn't talk, she doesn't engage like this, ever. I've never seen her." David wrapped his arm tighter around his wife, his own face a mixture of joy and disbelief and fear that if he blinked, this moment would evaporate like morning dew. Emma pulled back slightly from Rex, her hand still buried in his fur, and looked directly into the dog's eyes. She was smiling, a real smile, not the vague, distant expression she sometimes wore, but a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her entire face. Maria realized with a jolt that she'd almost forgotten what her daughter looked like when truly happy. Rex's tail was wagging so hard now that his entire back end was moving. A small sound escaped him, something between a whine and a groan, as if he was trying to communicate something important but didn't have the words. "He likes you, Emma," Sullivan said, his professional composure cracking as emotion flooded his voice. "Rex really likes you." Emma's smile grew wider, and she hugged Rex, wrapping her small arms as far around his neck as they would go. The German Shepherd, trained to search and protect and apprehend, melted into her embrace like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. The crowd began to applaud, softly at first, then louder, but Emma didn't seem to notice. She was in her own world, but for the first time she wasn't alone in it. Rex was there with her in that quiet space where words weren't necessary, where connection happened on a level deeper than language. Sullivan knelt down beside them, his hand on Rex's back, feeling the steady rhythm of his partner's breathing. "You know what, Emma?" he said, not really expecting any response but feeling compelled to speak anyway. "I think Rex has been waiting to meet you." Emma pulled back from the hug, her hand still resting on Rex, and looked at Officer Sullivan. For just a second their eyes met, really met, and Sullivan saw intelligence and depth and something profound in that little girl's gaze that made him understand. She wasn't broken or lost or damaged. She was just Emma, experiencing the world in her own way, on her own terms. And Rex understood her in a way no human had managed to. The German Shepherd licked Emma's hand and she giggled, an actual sound, wordless but joyful, that made Maria sob harder. Emma's attention returned to Rex, her fingers tracing the patterns in his fur, her face radiating contentment. "Can we stay longer?" David whispered to Maria, though it wasn't really a question. They both knew they weren't going anywhere. They would stay as long as Emma wanted to be here, with this remarkable dog who had somehow reached their unreachable daughter. Sullivan looked at the line of children still waiting, then at Emma, then at his watch. Protocol said each child got 2 minutes with Rex, but protocols, he decided, were made to be broken when miracles were happening. "Take your time," he said to the Martinez family. "Take all the time you need." Emma's hands continued their exploration of Rex's fur, her face peaceful and present in a way her parents had never seen. The dog sat motionless except for his gently wagging tail, his eyes half closed in contentment, as if he'd found his purpose. Neither the child nor the dog knew that in less than 60 seconds, everything would change. Neither knew that the silence was about to be broken in the most extraordinary way possible. But the universe knew, and it was holding its breath, waiting for the miracle that was coming. Emma's fingers traced patterns through Rex's thick coat, moving from his head down along his neck to his shoulders. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still, his breathing slow and steady, his eyes half closed in contentment. Maria had stopped crying long enough to wipe her face, but her phone was still recording, capturing every second of this unprecedented interaction between her silent daughter and this remarkable dog. Officer Sullivan watched with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years reading animal behavior. Rex's body language spoke volumes, the relaxed muscles, the soft eyes, the gentle lean into Emma's touch. This wasn't just tolerance or training. This was genuine affection, instant and absolute. In 5 years of partnership, Sullivan had never seen Rex bond with anyone this quickly, not even with Sullivan's own children. "How long has she been nonverbal?" Sullivan asked quietly, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb the moment. "Since birth," David answered, his voice raw with emotion. 3 years without a single word. Not mama, not dada, nothing. The doctors said." He stopped, unable to continue. "They said if she doesn't speak by 5, she probably never will," Maria finished, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "We've tried everything. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, special diets, alternative treatments. Nothing has worked. We were starting to accept that we might never hear her voice." Sullivan nodded slowly, his hand resting on Rex's back. He could feel the dog's heartbeat, steady and strong, and he could feel something else too, a kind of energy, an invisible current flowing between the dog and the child. He'd heard stories from other K9 handlers about dogs who seemed to have a sixth sense about people, who could detect things humans couldn't: fear, illness, emotional distress. But this was different. This felt like recognition. Emma leaned forward again, pressing her cheek against Rex's fur, her arms wrapping around his neck in another embrace. Rex let out a soft sigh, and his tail swept back and forth across the grass in slow, contented arcs. The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the unusual scene, but they maintained a respectful distance, sensing they were witnessing something special. "You're a good boy," Sullivan murmured to Rex, scratching behind the dog's ear. "Such a good boy." Emma pulled back from the embrace and looked up at Sullivan. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sullivan saw something shift in the little girl's expression, a flicker of awareness, of presence, of connection. Then Emma's gaze returned to Rex, and she did something that made everyone's breath catch. She opened her mouth. Maria's hand flew to her chest. David took a step forward, his entire body tensed. Sullivan froze, his hand still on Rex's back. Emma's lips moved, forming shapes they'd never formed before. Her tongue touched the roof of her mouth. Air moved through her vocal cords in a way it had only done for crying or humming, never for words. "Come on, baby," Maria whispered, so quietly only David could hear. "You can do it." Rex's ears perked forward and he lifted his head slightly, his eyes focused intently on Emma's face. It was as if the dog knew what was about to happen, as if he was encouraging her, waiting for her. Emma's small hand moved to rest on Rex's nose, her fingers curling around his muzzle gently. She took a breath, a deep, purposeful breath, and then in a voice that was soft but crystal clear, she spoke. "Doggy." The single word hung in the air like a bell that had been struck, its tone pure and resonant and impossible. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. The world had stopped spinning. Then reality crashed back in like a wave. "Oh my God!" Maria screamed, her phone clattering to the ground as her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, David," she spoke. David stumbled forward, falling to his knees beside his daughter, his face crumpling as tears poured down his cheeks. "Emma, Emma, baby, say it again. Please say it again." Emma looked at her father, seemingly confused by all the commotion, then back at Rex. She smiled, and in that same clear, small voice she said it again, "Doggy." Maria was sobbing so hard she could barely stand. A woman in the crowd started crying too, her hands pressed to her heart. A man pulled out his phone to record, his own eyes glistening. Children stared in confused wonder at why all the adults were crying. Sullivan felt his own throat close up, his vision blurring with tears he tried desperately to blink away. He was a grown man, a police officer, someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and had learned to keep his emotions in check. But this shattered every wall he'd built. Rex, as if understanding the magnitude of what had just happened, let out a soft whine and licked Emma's face. The little girl giggled, an actual, audible sound of joy, and hugged the dog again. "Good doggy," Emma said, her voice muffled against Rex's fur but unmistakably clear. "Good doggy." Maria dropped to the ground beside David, reaching for Emma, pulling her daughter into her arms while Emma kept one hand on Rex, unwilling to break the connection. "My baby," Maria sobbed into Emma's hair. "My sweet baby girl, I love you so much. I love you so much." David wrapped his arms around both of them, his shoulders shaking with the force of his crying. The family huddled there on the grass, holding each other, while Rex sat patiently beside them, his tail still wagging, his eyes bright and alert. Sullivan turned away, pretending to adjust his equipment belt, using the moment to wipe his eyes. When he turned back, half the crowd was crying. Complete strangers were embracing each other, sharing in this family's joy. An elderly woman was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. A teenage boy stood with his arm around his little sister, both of them staring in awe. "Did you get that?" Maria asked David frantically, suddenly remembering the recording. "Please tell me you got that." David looked around and spotted Maria's phone on the ground. He crawled over, grabbed it, and looked at the screen. "It's still recording," he said, his voice shaking. "We got it. We got everything." Emma, seemingly overwhelmed by her parents' emotional reaction, reached for Rex again. The dog immediately moved closer, pressing against her side, offering his solid, comforting presence. Emma's fingers tangled in his fur, and she rested her head against his shoulder. "Rex," Sullivan said softly, and the dog's ears turned toward his handler, though his eyes stayed on Emma. "Good boy, Rex, such a good boy." As if she'd been waiting for Sullivan to say his partner's name, Emma lifted her head and looked directly at the officer. Her mouth opened again, and every person watching held their breath. "Rex," she said, pronouncing the single syllable with perfect clarity. This time, Rex responded with a sound that was part whine, part bark, part something else entirely, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. He nuzzled Emma's face, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. The crowd erupted in applause, loud and sustained, people cheering and crying and laughing all at once. But Emma didn't seem to notice the noise. She was in her own world with Rex, speaking her first words to the dog who had somehow, inexplicably, unlocked her voice. "3 words," Maria whispered in wonder, holding David's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. She said 3 words in 5 minutes, after 3 years of silence. Sullivan knelt down again, his professional composure finally returning, though his eyes were still wet. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I think Rex and Emma need to see each other again." Maria couldn't stop shaking. Her entire body trembled as if she'd been submerged in ice water, adrenaline and shock and overwhelming joy flooding through her system all at once. She watched Emma stroke Rex's fur, watched her daughter's lips move as she whispered "doggy" again and again, each repetition a miracle that defied everything 3 years of medical expertise had told them was possible. I need to call Dr. Patterson, Maria said suddenly, fumbling for her phone with hands that wouldn't cooperate. I need to tell him. He needs to know. He said she might never. Her voice cracked, and fresh tears spilled down her already soaked cheeks. David gently took the phone from his wife's shaking hands. Not yet, he said softly. Let's just be here, right now, with her. Officer Sullivan stood slowly, giving the family space while keeping a watchful eye on Rex and Emma. The crowd that had gathered was dispersing reluctantly, people wiping their eyes, mothers clutching their children close, everyone seeming to understand they'd witnessed something profound. But a few people lingered, unable to tear themselves away. An older woman approached Sullivan, tears streaming down her weathered face. Officer, I've been a special education teacher for 37 years, she said, her voice quavering. I've worked with hundreds of nonverbal children, and I've never, she paused, pressing a tissue to her eyes. I've never seen anything like that. That little girl just spoke her first words and we were here to see it. Thank you for letting it happen. Sullivan nodded, not trusting his own voice. His throat felt raw, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Pride, wonder, humility, maybe all three. He looked down at Rex, who remained perfectly still beside Emma, and felt a surge of love for his partner so intense it physically hurt. Rex, Emma said again, patting the dog's head with more confidence now. Good Rex. Maria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She said his name. David, she said his name. Emma looked up at her mother, and for the first time in 3 years there was something different in her eyes, a spark of awareness, of connection, of presence that had always seemed just out of reach. Mama, Emma said, the word tentative and soft but unmistakably clear. Maria collapsed completely, her legs giving out beneath her. David caught her, lowering her to the ground as she sobbed uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. She called me Mama, Maria wailed. My baby called me Mama. David was crying too hard to respond, his arms wrapped around his wife, both of them shaking with the force of their emotions. 3 years of pain, of frustration, of grief, of watching other children reach milestones their daughter never reached, all of it came pouring out in that moment. Emma watched her parents with curiosity, her hands still on Rex. The dog whined softly and licked Emma's arm, drawing her attention back to him. Doggy crying? Emma asked, pointing at her parents. Sullivan's head snapped up. Had she just formed a question, a 2-word phrase? He knelt down beside Emma, his professional training kicking in despite his emotional state. That's right, Emma, but they're happy tears, happy because you're talking. You have a beautiful voice. Emma considered this, her brow furrowing slightly. Then she looked at Sullivan and said, with perfect seriousness, I like Rex. 3 words, a complete sentence. Sullivan felt his own eyes fill with tears again. Rex likes you too, he managed to say, very much. The young officer who had tried to stop Maria earlier approached, his own face showing signs of emotion. Sarge, he said quietly to Sullivan, I've never seen anything like this in my life. This is incredible. Sullivan nodded, standing and pulling the younger officer aside. Get me the contact information for the family, he said, his voice low and urgent. Phone number, email, address if they're willing, and clear my schedule for the next few weeks. Cancel whatever you need to cancel. Sorry. That little girl just spoke for the first time in her life because of Rex, Sullivan said, watching Emma trace patterns in the dog's fur. I don't know what's happening here. Maybe it's fate, maybe it's divine intervention, maybe it's just Rex being Rex. But whatever it is, we're not walking away from it. We're going to help this family, whatever they need. The young officer nodded, clearly moved. Yes, sir, absolutely. Maria had finally managed to compose herself enough to stand, though she kept one hand on David for support. She approached Sullivan, her face blotchy and swollen from crying but radiating a joy so intense it was almost painful to witness. Officer Sullivan, she began, her voice hoarse. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know if there are even words." "Jake," Sullivan interrupted gently. "Please call me Jake, and you don't need to thank me. Rex did this, not me." "Can we?" Maria swallowed hard, afraid to ask but unable to stop herself. "Would it be possible to see Rex again? I know you're busy, and I'm sure you have protocols and regulations, but if there's any way—" "Yes," Sullivan said immediately before she could even finish. "Yes, absolutely yes, I'll make it happen." Relief flooded Maria's face. "Really? You mean it?" Sullivan pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, then flipped it over and wrote his personal cell phone number on the back. "This is my direct line," he said, handing it to Maria. "Call me tomorrow. We'll set up regular visits. At the station, at the training facility, wherever works best for Emma. I'll get approval from my captain, and if I can't, I'll bring Rex on my own time." "We can pay," David said quickly, joining his wife. "Whatever it costs, therapy sessions, training fees, whatever." "No," Sullivan said firmly. "This isn't about money. This is about Emma and Rex." He looked down at his partner, who was still sitting patiently beside the little girl. "I think they need each other." Emma, as if sensing she was being discussed, looked up at the adults. "More Rex?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. "She asked a question," she whispered. "A real question." Sullivan crouched down to Emma's level. "Yes, Emma, more Rex. You can see Rex again tomorrow if your mama and daddy say it's okay. Would you like that?" Emma's face lit up with a smile so bright it could have powered the sun. "Yes," she said clearly, "more Rex tomorrow." The word tomorrow was slightly mangled, but the intent was unmistakable. David let out a choked laugh that was more like a sob. His daughter was speaking, actually speaking, in sentences, with intention, with joy. Sullivan felt his own chest tighten again. Whatever was happening here was bigger than him, bigger than protocol, bigger than procedures and regulations. This was life-changing, world-altering. This was the reason he'd become a police officer in the first place, to help people, to make a difference, to be there when miracles happened. "Tomorrow," he promised Emma, holding out his fist for a fist bump. Emma stared at his hand, confused, then looked at Rex. The dog, as if understanding, lifted his paw. Emma laughed, an actual, genuine laugh, and bumped her small fist against Rex's paw. "Smart girl," Sullivan said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma beamed at him, then returned her attention to Rex, her hands cupping the dog's face. "My Rex," she said possessively. "My good doggy." Maria and David exchanged glances, both of them crying again, but this time with hope instead of despair. Their daughter was speaking. She was connecting. She was emerging from her silent world, and a German shepherd named Rex was leading the way. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting golden light across Lincoln Park, Emma stayed beside Rex, talking to him in her small, clear voice. Simple words, fragments of sentences, but each one a victory, each one a miracle. And Jake Sullivan stood watching them, his heart full, knowing that his life and Rex's purpose had just changed forever. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Sunday morning arrived with Maria already awake at dawn, unable to sleep from the excitement coursing through her veins. She'd watched the video from Lincoln Park at least 50 times throughout the night, each viewing bringing fresh tears. Emma's voice, her actual voice, saying doggy and Rex and mama. It felt like a dream, and Maria was terrified she'd wake up to find it had all been her imagination. But when Emma woke up at 7, her first words were crystal clear. "Where Rex?" Maria burst into tears right there in Emma's bedroom, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. "We're going to see Rex today, baby. Officer Jake said we could visit." David appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled, his eyes red from crying himself to sleep the night before. "Did she just—" "She asked for Rex," Maria said, her voice breaking with joy. "She woke up and asked for him." By 9 o'clock, they were pulling into the parking lot of the Chicago Police Department's K-9 training facility on the south side. Jake Sullivan was already waiting outside, Rex sitting alertly at his side. The moment Emma saw them through the car window, she started bouncing in her car seat, more animation than her parents had seen in 3 years combined. "Rex," Emma shouted as Maria unbuckled her. "Rex, Rex." The German shepherd's ears perked forward, his tail beginning to wag before Emma had even exited the vehicle. When she ran toward him, Rex broke his sit position, something he never did, and trotted forward to meet her halfway. Jake watched with amazement as his meticulously trained partner, who could hold position under the most distracting circumstances, completely abandoned protocol for this 3-year-old girl. Emma threw her arms around Rex's neck, and the dog's entire body wiggled with joy. "Hi, Rex," Emma said clearly, pressing her face into his fur. "Missed you." Maria grabbed David's arm so hard she left marks. "Two-word phrase," she whispered. She said she missed him. Jake approached the family, his own face showing signs of a sleepless night. "I've been thinking about this all night," he admitted. "I called my captain at 6 this morning, explained the situation. He's approved regular visits, 3 times a week to start, more if Emma needs it. No charge. The department wants to help." "Jake, we can't possibly," David started. "You can and you will," Jake interrupted firmly. "What happened yesterday was extraordinary. Rex connected with Emma in a way I've never seen. I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but I know my partner and I know when something matters. This matters." Over the next hour, Emma sat on a training mat with Rex, talking constantly. Her vocabulary was limited, mostly nouns and simple verbs, but each word was intentional, purposeful. "Rex, sit. Good dog. Rex, run. I like Rex." She narrated everything the dog did, as if discovering language for the first time and finding it magical. Jake had contacted Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatric psychologist specializing in autism and communication disorders, and she arrived at 10 o'clock with a notebook and barely contained excitement. She'd reviewed the video Maria sent her 3 times and had canceled her entire morning schedule to witness this phenomenon in person. "Emma," Dr. Chen said gently, sitting cross-legged on the mat a few feet away. "I'm Sarah. Can you tell me about your friend?" Emma looked at the psychologist, then at Rex, then back. "Rex is doggy," she said simply. "My doggy." Dr. Chen's pen flew across her notebook. "That's right. What does Rex do?" "Rex sits, Rex runs, Rex." Emma paused, searching for a word, her face scrunched with concentration. "Rex loves Emma." Maria sobbed openly. 3 days ago, her daughter couldn't speak at all. Now she was expressing emotions, making connections, understanding abstract concepts like love. "Yes," Dr. Chen said, her own voice thick with emotion. "Rex loves Emma very much. How does that make you feel?" Emma thought about this, her small hand stroking Rex's fur. "Happy," she finally said. "Rex makes happy." By Wednesday, Emma's 3rd visit, her vocabulary had expanded exponentially. She was using 3- and 4-word sentences, asking simple questions and, most remarkably, engaging with adults other than her parents. When Jake asked her to help him give Rex a treat, Emma took the biscuit carefully and said, "Here, Rex. Good boy. Eat treat." Dr. Chen documented everything, her clinical fascination mixed with genuine wonder. "This is unprecedented," she told Maria and David during a break while Emma played with Rex in the training yard. "I've been studying nonverbal children for 15 years, and I've never seen progress this rapid. Something about Rex, his calmness, his consistency, his non-judgmental presence, has created a safe space for Emma to experiment with language." "Why Rex?" Maria asked, the question that had haunted her for 3 days. "Why not other dogs? Why not us? What makes Rex different?" Dr. Chen shook her head slowly. "I don't have a scientific answer. Sometimes the bond between humans and animals transcends explanation. Rex doesn't expect Emma to be anything other than who she is. He doesn't show frustration when she struggles. He just accepts her. And in that acceptance, Emma has found the courage to use her voice." By the end of the second week, Emma was speaking in complete sentences. I want to play with Rex. Can Rex come to my house? Rex is my best friend in the whole world. The phrase whole world had taken her 5 tries to pronounce correctly, but she'd persisted, determined to express the enormity of her feelings. Jake brought Rex to the Martinez home on Saturday, and watching Emma give the dog a tour of her room. This is my bed. This is my toys. This is Mr. Whiskers, my cat, left everyone in tears. She was narrating her life, something they'd thought would never happen. Dr. Chen presented Emma's case at a pediatric psychology conference, showing videos and data that left the audience stunned. Offers poured in from universities wanting to study the Emma-Rex connection, from media outlets wanting to share their story, from other families desperate for the same miracle. But Jake and the Martinez family decided to keep Emma's progress private, at least for now. This wasn't about publicity or research. This was about a little girl finding her voice and a police dog who had somehow known exactly how to help her find it. On Emma's 4th birthday in August, 3 months after that first word, she stood before her small party of family and carefully selected friends and said clearly, "Thank you for coming to my party. I'm very happy you're here." Then she ran to Rex, who wore a birthday hat slightly askew on his head, and threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered into his fur. "Thank you for teaching me to talk." Maria and David held each other, crying for what felt like the 1000th time, but these were tears of pure gratitude. Their daughter had been lost in silence, and a German shepherd named Rex had brought her home. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her university office 6 months after that first miraculous day at Lincoln Park, surrounded by mountains of research papers, brain scans, and video footage of Emma's sessions with Rex. The data was overwhelming, the implications staggering. She'd been studying Emma's case with the intensity of someone who knew they were witnessing something that would change their field forever. "Look at this," she said to her colleague Dr. Marcus Williams, pulling up an fMRI scan on her computer. "This is Emma's brain activity from last year during speech therapy sessions. See these areas?" She pointed to dimly lit regions on the screen. Broca's area and Wernicke's area, the language processing centers, barely any activation. She was shut down, locked in. Dr. Williams leaned forward, studying the scan intently. "Now look at this," Dr. Chen continued, pulling up a second scan. "This was taken 2 weeks ago during a session with Rex. Full activation. It's like someone flipped a switch. The neural pathways that were dormant are firing. She's not just speaking, her brain is fundamentally reorganizing itself." "What's causing it?" Dr. Williams asked, mesmerized by the dramatic difference between the scans. Dr. Chen sat back in her chair, removing her glasses to rub her tired eyes. "The best explanation I can offer is that Rex provides what we call a non-threatening linguistic environment. Children with selective mutism or communication disorders often experience anxiety around verbal communication. Every failed attempt to speak reinforces their silence, but Rex doesn't have expectations. He doesn't show disappointment or frustration. He just is." She pulled up a video of Emma and Rex from their most recent session. Emma was lying on the floor, her head resting on Rex's side, talking in a steady stream of consciousness. "Rex is warm. Rex is soft. I like when Rex breathes. It goes up and down, up and down. Rex's heart goes boom, boom, boom. My heart goes boom, boom too." "She's not just speaking," Dr. Chen said softly. "She's thinking out loud, processing her world through language for the first time. And Rex is her anchor, her safe space to experiment without fear of judgment." Meanwhile, at the K9 training facility, the bond between Emma and Rex had evolved into something that defied simple explanation. Jake Sullivan had been a K9 handler for 7 years, and he knew the difference between a dog following commands and a dog making choices from the heart. What Rex felt for Emma went beyond training, beyond duty. "Watch this," Jake said to Maria and David one crisp October afternoon. Emma was playing in the training yard, throwing a ball that Rex could easily catch in midair. But the dog was holding back, deliberately missing so Emma could succeed, letting her be the one in control. "He's protecting her," David observed, watching Rex position himself between Emma and the gate whenever someone walked by. "Not just physically, emotionally." Jake nodded. "Rex has always been protective, but this is different. With Emma, he's gentle in a way I've never seen. Last week I took him out on patrol for the first time in months. He performed perfectly, tracked a suspect, maintained his aggressive stance during an arrest. But the moment we got back and Emma was here, he transformed. It's like he knows she needs a different version of him." Emma ran over to them, slightly out of breath, Rex trotting beside her with the ball in his mouth. "Daddy, look, Rex and me played catch. I throwed it 5 times. "Threw it," Maria corrected gently, her heart swelling with joy at having grammar to correct. "Threw it," Emma repeated carefully. "I threw it 5 times and Rex caught everyone." Rex dropped the ball at Emma's feet and sat, his tail wagging. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her face into his fur. "Rex is the bestest dog in the whole world," she declared. "Better than all the other dogs combined together." Jake laughed, crouching down beside them. "You know what, Emma? I think Rex would say the same thing about you, that you're the bestest friend he's ever had." Emma pulled back, looking at Rex seriously. "Rex, am I your best friend?" The German Shepherd tilted his head, as if considering the question, then licked Emma's face enthusiastically. Emma dissolved into giggles, that beautiful sound that never failed to bring tears to her parents' eyes. "He said yes," Emma announced. "Rex said I'm his best friend." By late November, Emma had started preschool 3 mornings a week at Little Learners Academy. It was a small, specialized program for children with developmental differences, and the staff had been briefed on Emma's extraordinary progress. Her teacher, Ms. Patricia Akanjo, called Maria after the first week with an update. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, her warm voice filled with genuine admiration, "Emma is remarkable. She's engaging with other children, participating in circle time, and today she told the class all about her best friend Rex. She spoke for 5 whole minutes about him. The other children were captivated." Maria felt the familiar sting of happy tears. She really did. She really did, and you know what else? She's helping the other nonverbal children. There's a boy in class, Tommy, who hasn't spoken yet. Emma went up to him today and said, "It's okay if you don't have words yet. I didn't have words either, but then I met Rex and he helped me find them. Maybe you need to find your Rex too." "Mrs. Martinez, I've been teaching for 20 years and I've never seen a child show that level of empathy and self-awareness." That evening, Dr. Chen visited the Martinez home to conduct her monthly evaluation. She watched Emma interact with Rex in the living room, the girl reading a picture book aloud while Rex lay beside her, his head in her lap, looking for all the world like he was listening to every word. "The cat jumped over the moon," Emma read slowly, her finger tracing the words. "That's silly, Rex. Cats can't jump that high, can they?" Rex's ear twitched and Emma laughed. "You're right, it's just a story, but it's a good story." Dr. Chen turned to Maria and David, who were watching from the kitchen. "In all my years studying child development, I've never documented a case quite like this. Emma's progress isn't just about speech acquisition. She's developing emotional intelligence, abstract thinking, empathy. Rex hasn't just given her words, he's given her a framework for understanding herself and others." "What happens if—" David couldn't finish the question, but everyone knew what he was asking. "What happens if Rex retires? What happens if something happens to Rex?" "We've thought about that," Jake said quietly. He'd arrived just minutes earlier, still in uniform from his shift. "Rex is only 5. German Shepherds can work until they're 8 or 9. We've got time. And when he does retire, I've already made the decision. He's coming home with me and Emma can visit whenever she wants. For as long as Rex lives, he'll be part of Emma's life." Emma looked up from her book. Rex isn't going anywhere, she said with the absolute certainty of childhood. Rex and me are forever, right, Rex? The dog's tail thumped against the floor, and he licked Emma's hand. See, Emma smiled. Forever. 1 year after that life-changing Saturday in June, Maria Martinez stood outside Little Learners Preschool watching parents arrive for the annual spring showcase. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down Emma's dress, a bright yellow one with sunflowers that Emma had picked out herself, saying, "This one, Mama. Rex likes yellow." Today was monumental. Today, Emma would speak in front of the entire school, and Rex would be there. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" Maria asked, kneeling to Emma's level. Emma, now 4 years old, considered the question thoughtfully. "A little bit nervous," she admitted, "but Rex will be there, so I'll be brave. Rex makes me brave." Maria's eyes filled with tears, a common occurrence these days, though now they were tears of joy rather than despair. Her daughter was speaking in complex sentences, expressing emotions, understanding abstract concepts. The silent little girl who had lived in her own unreachable world was gone, replaced by this vibrant, talkative, empathetic child who couldn't stop sharing her thoughts with everyone around her. David pulled into the parking lot with Jake Sullivan and Rex in the passenger seat. They'd made special arrangements for Rex to attend, with the fire marshal's approval and everything. When Emma saw the K9 unit SUV, she broke free from Maria's hand and ran toward it, her yellow dress flowing behind her like sunshine. "Rex," she called out, her voice clear and strong. "You came, you really came." Jake opened the back door, and Rex bounded out, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. Emma threw her arms around him, and the German Shepherd gave her face a thorough licking that sent her into fits of giggles. "Did you miss me, boy? I missed you. I missed you so much. I have so many things to tell everyone about you today." Jake exchanged a glance with David, both men fighting back emotion. They'd witnessed this transformation day by day, but somehow it never stopped being miraculous. Inside the school gymnasium, parents filled the rows of folding chairs while children fidgeted backstage. Ms. Akanjo had created a special presentation called Our Heroes, where each child would talk about someone who made a difference in their lives. When she'd asked Emma who her hero was, there had been no hesitation. "Rex," Emma had declared immediately. "Rex is my hero because he taught me how to use my voice." Now, as Ms. Akanjo welcomed everyone and began introducing the children, Emma stood backstage with Rex beside her, Jake's hand on his partner's collar. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the front row with a video camera, documenting this moment for her research, and for Emma's family to treasure forever. "And now," Ms. Akanjo announced, her voice warm with affection, "please welcome Emma Martinez, who will introduce us to a very special hero." Emma walked onto the small stage, and Rex followed at her side, his K9 vest gleaming under the lights. A murmur rippled through the audience. No one had expected a police dog to be part of the presentation. Emma stood at the microphone, which had been lowered to her height, and looked out at the sea of faces. For a moment, Maria's heart stopped. What if the crowd overwhelmed her? What if she froze? But then Emma's small hand reached down and rested on Rex's head, and just like that first day at Lincoln Park, the dog's presence steadied her. Emma took a breath and began to speak. "Hi, my name is Emma Martinez and I'm 4 years old. This is Rex. He's a police dog and he's my best friend in the whole entire world." Her voice was clear, confident, audible throughout the room. "A long time ago, when I was 3, I couldn't talk. I had words inside my head, but they couldn't come out of my mouth. My mama and daddy were very sad because they didn't know what I was thinking or feeling. The doctors said maybe I would never talk." Maria gripped David's hand, tears already streaming down her face. "But then one day, we went to the park and I saw Rex. And when I looked at him, something happened inside me. He looked at me like he could see all my words that were stuck inside, and he didn't mind that I couldn't say them. He just loved me anyway." Emma paused, stroking Rex's head. The dog sat perfectly still, his eyes gentle, as if he understood the importance of this moment. And then the words started to come out. The first word was doggy, then Rex, then mama, and Rex was so happy when I talked. He wagged his tail and licked my face, and I knew that talking was a good thing, a safe thing. The audience was completely silent, everyone transfixed by this little girl's story. Rex comes to visit me 3 times every week. He helps me practice my words. He listens to me read books. He plays with me. And when I'm scared or sad, he lets me hug him until I feel better. Rex saved me from the quiet place I was stuck in. He gave me my voice. Emma looked down at Rex, her face radiant with love. Rex is a hero because he helps people. He finds lost people and catches bad guys. But he's my hero because he found me when I was lost in the silence. And I want everyone to know that Rex is the best dog that ever lived, and I love him more than anything. The gymnasium erupted in applause. People stood, many wiping their eyes as Emma wrapped her arms around Rex's neck. Jake stood with his hands clasped over his heart, his face wet with tears. Dr. Chen captured every second, knowing she was documenting something extraordinary. Ms. Akanjo joined Emma on stage, her own eyes glistening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in recognizing Officer Jake Sullivan and K9 Rex from the Chicago Police Department. The work they do in our community extends far beyond law enforcement. Rex, you are a true hero. Jake walked onto the stage as the applause continued and accepted a special certificate the school had prepared, an honorary citizenship to Little Learners Academy. But the real recognition came when Emma threw herself into his arms and said, "Thank you for sharing Rex with me, Officer Jake. Thank you for helping me find my words." After the ceremony, children and parents surrounded Rex, everyone wanting to pet the famous dog. Emma stayed close, proudly introducing her best friend to everyone. "This is Rex. He's very special. He helped me talk. Maybe he can help you too if you need help." A small boy named Tommy, who hadn't spoken since starting school, approached cautiously. Emma took his hand gently. "It's okay, Tommy. Rex is nice. He won't hurt you. He just wants to be your friend." Tommy reached out tentatively and touched Rex's fur. The dog turned his gentle eyes to the boy and nuzzled his hand. And though Tommy didn't speak that day, Emma stayed beside him, talking to Rex, showing Tommy that words could be safe, that speaking could be joyful. As the sun set that evening, the Martinez family sat in their backyard with Jake and Rex, sharing pizza and lemonade. Emma lay on the grass with her head on Rex's side, telling him about her day, about the friends she'd made, about the book she was reading, about everything and nothing. "Emma," Maria said softly, "do you remember what it was like before you could talk?" Emma thought about this, her fingers tangling in Rex's fur. "A little bit. It was like being behind glass. I could see everything, but I couldn't reach it. Everything felt far away." "And now?" David asked. Emma smiled, the golden light of sunset illuminating her face. "Now I can reach everything. Now the world feels close. Now I have words for all my feelings." She hugged Rex tighter. "And now I have Rex." As darkness fell and fireflies began their nightly dance, Jake prepared to leave. Emma stood at the door, holding Rex's leash, reluctant to let him go. "I'll see you Tuesday," Jake promised. "Same time, same place." "Forever?" Emma asked, her voice small. "Forever," Jake confirmed. "Rex will always be part of your life, Emma, I promise." Emma knelt down one more time, pressing her forehead to Rex's. "I love you, Rex. Thank you for teaching me to talk. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for finding me." Rex licked her face gently, his tail wagging, his eyes full of devotion that transcended species, transcended explanation, transcended everything except pure, unconditional love. And as Jake and Rex drove away, Emma stood waving, her voice calling out into the night. "Goodbye, Rex. See you Tuesday. I love you." Maria and David stood behind their daughter, holding each other, marveling at the miracle that had unfolded over the past year. Their silent child had found her voice, and a police dog named Rex had been the key that unlocked it. The night sky filled with stars, each one a tiny light in the darkness. And somewhere in that vast universe, forces unknown had aligned to bring together a nonverbal little girl and a German Shepherd police dog, proving that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected places. Emma turned from the door and looked at her parents, her face glowing with happiness. "Mama, Daddy, can I tell you a story before bed? A story about a little girl and a magical dog who saved her." "We would love that, sweetheart," Maria said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We would absolutely love that." And as Emma began to speak, weaving words into a story, creating worlds with language she'd once been denied, Maria and David knew with absolute certainty. This was their miracle. This was their new beginning. This was love in its purest, most powerful form, the unbreakable bond between a child who needed a voice and a dog who showed her how to find it. The end.